Pay attention. This is the lore starter pack for all the homies who skip through the story. Even if you read the story, it was probably confusing. Here it is. Take notes.
Okay. If you've clicked this video, you're probably thinking about playing Honkai Star Rail, and if you've seen any of the promotional material, you probably realize that it's a pretty story-heavy game. And story-heavy games tend to have a lot of new stuff to remember, especially sci-fi games, like
there is so much text.
This one. And that steep learning curve often makes for a confusing first few hours while you wrap your head around what's going on and what it all means. But not this time. This time, dear viewer, you have me, Ashikai, lore and theory enthusiast, to assist you in understanding this brand new world of Honkai Star Rail. So this video is a gentle, mostly spoiler-free introduction to the world and lore of Honkai Star Rail.
Oh, perfect.
The general idea here is to help ease you into some new terminology and give some more context for how the world within the game works, so you're not totally blindsided and confused or overwhelmed when you pick up the game for the first time. Now, I did say mostly spoiler-free because there will be some minor spoilers for the first hour-ish of the game just because the context is needed. But before we begin, I know a good chunk of you are probably wondering, do I need to play Honkai Impact 3rd to understand the story of Honkai Star Rail? Because, you know, they both have Honkai in the title. And the truth is, no you don't.
Oh, thank
While
God.
playing Honkai Impact may increase your enjoyment of Honkai Star Rail, the two games...
Because I think like the characters are like different universes, but same characters or something like it's like parallel universe theory something.
Take place in entirely different universes. So even if
There you
characters
go.
in Star Rail share looks and names with characters from Honkai Impact, they're not the same people, so you don't need to worry about not knowing their backstories or anything.
Wait, isn't that convenient? You can just recycle the same characters and throw them into a different game? Easy money.
There is one exception to this rule though, but we'll talk about him later. But if you are still worried that you might be missing out on some important lore or world building by not playing Honkai Impact, I will start this video by explaining the most relevant part of Hoyo's multiverse setup that carries over from the world building of Honkai Impact. It's short, simple, and it'll probably get explained independently in Star Rail at some point anyway, but here you go. Now within Hoyo's multiverse setup, which I will now just call the Hoyoverse, there are two primal forces, the imaginary tree and the Sea of Quanta. So it might be easier to think of them as the Tree of Order and the Sea.
Okay, there's a big ass tree in Genshin too, and they don't really touch on this, but it's probably the same thing.
Of chaos. It's a gross oversimplification, but I think it's easier for the unfamiliar people to conceptualize it this way, since the forces of order and chaos are generally at odds with each other, and the imaginary tree and the Sea of Quanta are trying to devour each other. So
okay.
Same kind of concept.
Okay, checks out.
Now, metaphorically speaking, the Sea of Quanta is basically this pool of infinite possibilities from which grows this imaginary tree, which takes those possibilities and orders them, branching out into countless directions. The leaves that sprout at the end of these branches each contain an entire universe in and of themselves. And because these universes are part of this imaginary tree, they all operate based on the laws of the, quote, imaginary. So this imaginary energy from the imaginary tree makes up the basis that is called Honkai in Honkai Impact, but Star Rail just calls it imaginary energy. Imaginary energy is pretty important in Star Rail as eons and paths, which we will go over in a bit, are very powerful entities made up of imaginary energy. It basically makes the world go round. Regardless of how it manifests, though, imaginary energy is likely the reason why Honkai Impact and Honkai Star Rail share the Honkai in their names. But that's really it. That's where the connections between the games end and where our introduction to the unique world of Star Rail begins. But if you're still worried you're missing out on something, I will leave a link to Island XD's guide to Honkai Impact for Star Rail players. Now, let's set all that Impact talk aside and get familiar with the world of Star Rail.
Okay, after playing like a good 6 hours of Star Rail, I can confirm that all of that stuff about Honkai Impact, you don't really need to know it because you can pretty much follow along through the story. The game breaks it down.
Let's start by talking about paths. Star Rail's universe is focused on this concept of paths, and those who walk a path are known as path striders. Paths are basically philosophical ideas given some kind of metaphysical form through the accumulation of imaginary energy, which makes them incredibly powerful forces. By believing in and practicing the concepts of a chosen path, a person can draw on the powers of that path and become a path strider. Now, like I said, a path is a philosophical idea or a concept. Those who follow a path believe in its philosophy. For example, path striders of the path destruction may believe that the universe is a mistake and therefore must be destroyed. However, mortals are not bound to any one singular path any more than they are bound to any one way of thinking. If their philosophy changes, their path can change as well. For gameplay purposes, paths manifest as a type of class, if you will. Those who follow the path of abundance, for example, might be considered to have the class of a healer or a cleric, while someone following the path of destruction has abilities more like a fighter or a berserker. Now, if one finds themselves completely committed to a path and manages to explore the deepest parts of it to truly comprehend it in its entirety, they may transcend their mortal form and become something known as an Eon. Now, you'll notice I did not specify that the one ascending had to be human, and that—
Wait. So let me get this straight. If you just stick to a philosophy and you just embody that philosophy, you just become like a god?
It's because they don't. Any sentient life form, whether organic or inorganic, has the capability of becoming an Eon, so that includes things like artificial intelligence. As for what an Eon actually is, they are something like the embodiment or master of a path. While they're not traditional gods, they are beings of godlike proportions. To put it into context, they're kind of like an ocean, while a Pathstrider is a mere droplet of water. And while they are ageless, they are not actually immortal, as they can be killed by either another Eon or by ceasing to walk their path. Because remember, they're the embodiment of their path, so without their path, they're basically nothing. This means that an Eon is forever bound to their path, and they cannot stray from it. The Eon of destruction can't just wake up one day and decide to walk the path of harmony, for example.
So you just gotta have the strongest personality in the universe, become like a god, and then if you just change your mind, you just lose your god status. Got it.
Become an Eon, you trade your ability to change
your mind, and you just fucking die.
For incredible power derived from one singular path. Now, as godlike entities of cosmic proportions, an Eon's interest in mortals may vary, with some Eons choosing to meddle more than others, but ultimately the lives of mortals are small and inconsequential to them. Sometimes, though, a person with a powerful affinity or talent within a given path will pique the interest of an Eon. This is known as drawing the gaze of an Eon. Those who have been gazed upon by an Eon become something called an emanator, which is kind of like the Eon's will given mortal form. Emanators are extremely powerful and often attract other followers of the same paths. In doing so, they form something called a faction, which is really just a fancy way to group followers of an Eon together under one kind of cohesive label.
All right, that's pretty cool.
Now, though factions tend to follow the will of an Eon, forming a faction doesn't necessarily guarantee any sort of special blessing or assistance from the Eon, regardless of whether or not a faction contains an emanator. In the end, factions are just people bound by a common way of thinking, so it's handy to know the philosophy of each Eon and their path in order to understand the goals of their associated factions. Although, since factions are mortal creations, their understanding of their Eon's path can often be twisted or far removed from its original intended meaning. The meaning of things is pretty subjective, after all.
All right, are you guys following? You guys better be following, because I'm going to need reminders later. But just remember, this is going to be on the test later, so pay attention.
Currently, there are 18 known Eons, but only 7 of these Eons' paths are available to playable characters. Every Eon will play a role in the story at some point, and
there's 17 known Eons? So if you have like your own, if you just go your own way and you just have your own philosophy and you're super strong at that, can you just create a new Eon in the universe? That's cool.
We'll probably make a video going over all 18 at some point,
Wait,
but
what?
there are only 2 that we're going to familiarize ourselves with today. Those are Akavili the Trailblaze and Nanook the Destruction. Akavili was one of those rare Eons that enjoyed mingling with mortals. In fact, they're considered to be the Eon that was closest to mortals. They were also responsible for laying down the rails for the Astral Express train system throughout the universe, and they invited mortals to board these trains. Those who did so joined the Trailblaze path and formed the faction known as the Nameless. Akavili would often adventure alongside their Pathstriders, making them very unique among the Eons. But I'm using past tense here because Akavili died in a mysterious accident that derailed the Astral Express and wrecked many of its train cars. Without the Astral Express, the Nameless also vanished. But as luck would have it, one of those broken trains landed on the planet Himiko was from. She managed to repair it, reforming the Nameless faction and making the Trailblaze path accessible once again.
Alright, that just makes her so much cooler, than I already thought she was.
This is the Astral Express train car that we board as a player. Now, rumor has it that Akavili's heart is
Like, what a badass boss lady.
in the core that powers the Astral Express, and that's what allows the train to travel across the galaxy. But there's no evidence to support that claim. But there must be some level of truth to the nature of the core of the train, if only because without the power of an Eon, travel via the Express would be difficult for just a normal Pathstrider. Unlike the free-spirited and benevolent Akavili, the Eon
I just have to pause and say this real quick. Her music choice in this video is spot on. It is so good.
of destruction, known by the name Nanook, believes that the birth of the universe was a mistake and desires the destruction of all civilizations. Therefore,
Okay, and that guy's like the cause of all of the problems in the game. And he's the one that's like, we think is the one planting all the Stellarons and ruining all these worlds and stuff.
followers are known as the Antimatter Legion, or
It's basically the anti-spiral from Gurren Lagann. This ripped straight from it.
just the Legion, and actively attack civilizations with the goal of total annihilation. Nanook is the one responsible for the distribution of Stellarons throughout the universe, and Stellarons play a huge motivating role in Starrail's story. So while we don't really understand Nanook's motivations beyond destroy everything, he is a key Eon to pay attention to because of his connection to the Stellarons. So what is a Stellaron? Well, a Stellaron is widely believed to be a seed of destruction created and distributed by Nanook the Destruction. They're also called the Cancer of all worlds. These seeds fracture reality and spawn rifts that lead to interdimensional spaces called fragmentums, and those attract monsters, so you can see why that would be problematic. The genius Herta claims that Stellarons are actually a type of life form, since they do appear to have some sentience and have been known to communicate with those of a certain aptitude. She also claims that Stellarons can tether themselves to an Eon's path, and that they are capable of responding to the cumulative desires of a world or planet that it happens to find itself on. In certain circumstances, it can even fulfill those desires, but that comes at a cost. Stellarons are the seeds of Nanook, after all, and even if they can perform miracles...
Okay. The fact that she's bringing up sentience, minor spoilers, so maybe skip a little bit, but Cocolia is talking to some kind of like weird being that's supposed to, what I'm assuming is supposed to be the Stellaron talking to her and like tricking her, I guess, or like misleading her into doing what the Stellaron wants her to do. And I really am looking forward to that mission when we get to that.
They ultimately bring disasters. Now, within the first hour or so of the game, we, the player, and the crew of the Astral Express will learn that the Trailblazer has a Stellaron inside of their body, of all places.
Yo, Kafka baddie.
This is highly unusual, and while it seems to be pretty stable in there, it's too risky for the Trailblazer to stay in any one place for too long. If the Stellaron becomes unstable for any reason, they could bring destruction to any ship, space station, or planet that they happen to be on. Luckily, the nameless aboard the Astral Express are
Okay, I gotta say, guys.
Station or planet that they happen to
Hold
be on.
Hold on, pay attention. Hold on. Guys, come on now. Female MC is way better looking than the male MC.
The nameless aboard the Astral Express are quite experienced in dealing with the Stellaron, since simply having an unstable Stellaron within range of the train tracks can cause the train to come to a complete stop, and it won't move again until the offending Stellaron has been neutralized. But as long as the Stellaron inside the Trailblazer's body is stable, the Astral Express can move unimpeded. If it becomes unstable, though, well, there are at least people around who can deal with it right away. All in all, the Astral Express is the safest place for the Trailblazer to be. I've mentioned the Nameless faction quite a bit, but I haven't really talked about them individually, so let me rectify this now, because as members of this faction ourselves, we'll be spending a lot of time with them. To start, we have the elegant scientist Himiko, also known as the one who found and repaired...
This concept art right here, whatever you want to call this gacha art is so good.
...and repaired the Astral Express, and that kinda makes her the boss. She might also look pretty laid back, but Welt says she's extremely driven and may be chasing a very big but unknown dream. Now, she does share looks and name with a popular character from Honkai Impact, but it's very important to note that they are not the same person. Next, we have Dan Hung, who's level-headed and clever. He boarded the train to escape a past that he doesn't like to talk about, and he kind of functions as the train's guardian. He says he's running from something or someone, but he can't quite seem to remember what or who it was, so
oh, poor baby.
He's never stayed in one place for too long until he came aboard the Astral Express. Like Dunhung.
Wait. Is Blade evil? Is he a meanie? He's so cool though.
Dunhung, March 7th.
Why the evil character is always hot?
Has a bit of a foggy past. She was found by the Nameless floating through space inside of a big chunk of weird magic ice. She doesn't remember anything about her past, so they just named her after the day that they found her, which was March 7th. She's excitable, carefree, and at times a little bit careless.
I'm so looking forward to learning more about her past.
You can always count on her for optimism and her trusty camera. Welt is among the oldest members of the Astral Express and is from the planet Earth, a planet that no one else seems to have heard of before. Long after the Honkai threat on Earth had been dealt with, Welt found himself forced to travel into space with a friend to deal with another threat. Unfortunately, his ship passed through a portal and broke down, stranding him until he got picked up by the Astral Express.
Oh, we should read this. There's like a manga that goes over this. I don't know where to find it, but I heard about it in another lore video.
He's searching for a way back home though, but until then, he's just kind of chilling. Now, Welt is the only character who's actually from the world set in Honkai Impact, and so far, all references to that game are only relevant to his personal backstory. I think it's possible that, through Welt, we might learn more about the true nature of the events that occur in Honkai Impact, but I'm not convinced that any of those revelations will be impactful to the story of Starrail. That said, if you want to learn more about him, most of his really interesting story beats and accomplishments are actually found in comic form, so I'll leave some links to those in the description box if you're interested.
Oh, hell yeah.
And that leaves us with the player character.
Dude, the texting mechanic of this game is so hilarious. I love it.
The Trailblazer. The Trailblazer has a pretty well-defined and sassy personality and does have voiced lines throughout the game, unlike some of Hoyoverse's previous player characters. The Trailblazer is a character with no known past or family, and in fact, they appear to be completely synthetic, created by a mysterious faction known as the Stellaron Hunters. During the first hour of the game, two Stellaron Hunters, Kafka and Silverwolf, infiltrate Herda's space station and create the Trailblazer as a vessel to house a Stellaron that was being kept by Herda. While their exact motives are unclear, the Stellarron Hunters seem to want the Trailblazer to board the Astral Express in order to reach the end of their story, whatever that means. So with no past, no ties to any planet in particular, and a ticking Eon bomb of unknown purpose in their body, the Trailblazer doesn't really have anything except that singular goal of reaching the end of their story to guide them. Now, this is just speculation on my part, but the Astral Express was created by the Eon Akavili, and Akavili's origin planet is known as Pagana. Pagana is the location where the silver rails of the Astral Express begin and end. So if the Stellaron Hunters want the Trailblazer to follow the path of the Trailblaze and reach the end of their story via the Astral Express, perhaps the Trailblazer's destiny lies in the final destination of Pagana.
Oh, that is
the
cool.
Reasons behind the journey and what they might find when they
It's only going to take us 8 years of playing this game to get there, though.
arrive at the final stop of the Astral Express, you'll just have to play the game and find out for yourself. I, however, will be covering the lore of
years of content and then thousands of dollars drowned in gacha.
This game, including story recaps, summaries of in-game materials, character profiles, and so much more, so drop by whenever you need a break from combat. honkaistarrail has a ton of compelling characters to meet, stunning locations to explore across the universe, and plenty of mysteries to uncover. And this is just the beginning. So again, my name is Ashikai, and allow me to formally welcome you aboard the Astral Express with nonstop service to, well, anywhere you want to go. So good luck, have fun, and I'll see you next time.
Pog. That was a good video. I appreciate that. I've seen a couple lore videos. This one was definitely the one that made the most sense on the first watch through. That makes sense. It was the easiest to congest, or not congest. It was the easiest to digest on its own without any outside information about stuff.